Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another lore video. Today's topic will be the Everchosen himself, Archaon. So without further ado, let's begin. Archaon, the Everchosen, the Three-Eyed King, and the Lord of the End Times, is the self-proclaimed supreme champion of the four Chaos Gods. And that title is rightfully his, for he is the one who ushered in the End Times and ended the Warhammer world as we know it. But before this man became the chosen son of Chaos and ushered in the End Times, he had another name and lived another life. You see, the man who would later become known as Archaon the Everchosen was born inside the confines of the Empire. Archaon was born in a small village called Hagendorf on the coast of Nordland, and was the result of a Nordic raiding party towards the town, where his mother was repeatedly raped. The village was sacked, and Archaon's mother was left for dead. However, she was found by her husband and her children while she was still clinging to life, and later gave birth to the raiders' bastard son. Birthing such a child proved to be too much for this woman, and she died shortly after childbirth. The woman's husband could not bear the sight of the child, as the child was not his, and the child took his wife away. Because of this, the child was abandoned and almost savaged by the wolves of Lorelorn. However, it seemed like fate was not to allow the child to die, as a local priest called Hieronymus Dagobert appeared and drove off the wolves. Hieronymus took pity on the small child, taking the small baby under his wing and raising him, even giving him a name. From then on, the small child was to be known as Diedrich. Diedrich was a devout child, and due to his northern heritage, grew tall and strong. When he was of age, Diedrich became a squire to Sir Castor, who was a Templar of Sigmar. However, his tutelage under the Templar was not to last long, as Castor died after falling into a pit trap in the Drakewald forest, then being devoured by the local night goblins, who had also killed Diedrich's fellow squire, Niels. Diedrich barely survived. However, as fate would have it, he had retrieved Castor's sword, Terminus, and his warhorse, Oberon, and was able to escape. He then took it upon himself to return Castor's belongings to his now widow. However, she did not have any interest on keeping her former husband's belongings, and allowed Diedrich to keep them. She also bequeathed to him the surname Castor, and with her sponsorship, he was able to join the prestigious Order of the Twin-Tailed Orb. Interestingly enough, the man who would later become the Everchosen was quite the fanatical follower of Sigmar, and had no problem cutting down the Agents of Chaos and the presumed Agents of Chaos, even if they were small children. Diedrich followed his knightly duties without question, until several years later, where his life would change forever. Diedrich had found himself fighting a war band of beastmen, which, for the powerful knight with Norscan blood flowing through his veins, had no issue dispatching. However, he was wounded when his weapon clashed against that of a beastman, and a shard of warpstone pierced his eye. Now normally, even a small shard of warpstone would be damning to any mere mortal. However, Diedrich was no mere mortal, as Norscan blood flowed through his veins, and thus the essence of chaos was already inside of him. Shortly after recovering from this ordeal, he had learnt of his true heritage, that his mother was a woman of Nordland, and his father was actually a man of the North. This news horrified Diedrich beyond belief, but it wasn't until Diedrich had come across a specific set of writings that his road of damnation would not begin. Diedrich had stumbled across a number of books penned by the heretic Necrodomo the Insane. The writing spoke of a prophecy of a man who would become the Everchosen, one favored by all the Chaos Gods, and empowered to see the world remade in their image. And much to Diedrich's horror, it looks like he was to become the Everchosen himself. Diedrich travelled far and wide in hopes of finding salvation, arriving at Altdorf and kneeling before the giant golden statue of Sigmar himself. There he begged for a sign, or for any sort of help from the god of the empire, in hopes that something or someone may answer his prayers, and the darkness that has come to consume him will be no more. But as we know all too well, the statue stood silent, and Sigmar did not answer his prayers. His despair turned to rage, and he renounced the gods of the south. Yet surprisingly, also did not choose to serve the Chaos gods. Diedrich had sought to end his own life. However, the Chaos gods would not allow this, as the demon prince Be'lakor had been watching over the young Norscan for many, many years, even so far as to altering time, as Diedrich had actually died a number of times over the years. And due to the interference of a demon prince, Diedrich did not end his life. Or, better yet said, the Chaos gods brought him back. This fueled the knight's insanity, and he eventually gave himself into chaos. Diedrich Kastner, the once noble knight, was now essentially dead. And from this rose Archaon. Archaon then travelled to the Chaos Wastes, where he offered himself to the Chaos gods to be their tool of destruction. His life was unnaturally extended, and he set upon a quest to gather the 6 gifts of chaos in order to become the Everchosen. Now, I shall touch upon these treasures ever so slightly, as they are fitting for their own lore videos. These treasures are the Mark of Chaos Undivided, which marks the bearer as the chosen warrior of all the Chaos gods. Unlike the Mark of Chaos supplied by an individual Chaos god, this is known to be far more powerful, as it grants the boon of all the Chaos gods in unison. To do this, Archaon acquired the aid of a band of Chaos warriors known as the Swords of Chaos, whom he had met in the past before, and they journeyed together to the lands of Nagaroth. There they battled their way through dark elves and monsters alike, until reaching a gigantic citadel, which was so dark from the inside that none could see. The darkness of the citadel would not even allow torches to be lit, for when a torch was lit, it was immediately snuffed out. Unspeakable horrors lay within the darkness, but Archaon was unafraid, and he journeyed into the citadel alone. There in the pitch darkness, he slew anything that stood in his way, eventually coming across an altar of the Chaos gods. He offered them the hearts of the monsters he had slain, and when he emerged, he bore the eternally burning mark of chaos on his forehead. Next, he sought out to acquire the armour of Morcar, Morcar being the very first Everchosen, who was killed by Sigmar himself prior to his ascension to godhood. It is said that this armour makes the wearer almost impervious to damage. Archaon left Nagaroth on a stolen ship made of black metal, and pulled by a massive sea drake. He also took leadership of a seafaring warband while en route to his destination. They sailed to a mysterious land which was populated with savage half-humans, where it is said that neither the sun nor the moon had ever touched their pale skin. Archaon and his warband entered battle for 6 days and 6 nights, but eventually the city of these half-humans was laid to dust, and Archaon journeyed into the city's necropolis until he found the tomb of Morcar and the armor he was searching for. Yet the trials of chaos are never easy, as when Archaon tried to reach out to the armor sprung to life, and Archaon and the armor of Morcar were then joined in brutal battle. It had looked like the armor was going to best Archaon. However, Archaon did come prepared, for he cursed at the armor in the ancient language of the Umberogan tribe, which was the tribe that Sigmar Heldenhammer was born into, and had used to defeat Morcar himself. This had stunned the armor, which allowed Archaon to banish the spirit of Morcar, which was dwelling within. Archaon had now claimed his second treasure, and set off to claim the third, this being the Eye of Shirian, which was named after the sorcerer who discovered it. It is said that the Eye of Shirian grants prophetic powers. However, it is used in its full potential when placed inside the Crown of Domination, which then allows the user to predict and avoid the attacks of their enemies. The eye was found in the lair of a chaos dragon known as Flamefang. This dragon valued the eye far more than any of his other treasures, and Archaon placed his claim for the eye by smashing his axe into Flamefang's head. Man and dragon fought for what seemed to be an eternity, with Flamefang even swallowing Archaon whole, but the armor of Morcar protected him, and Archaon was able to hack his way out of the dragon. He had inflicted such grievous wounds on the dragon itself that Flamefang died of exhaustion and blood loss. Archaon then plucked the eye of Shirian from the dragon's belly and hung it around his neck as his rightful reward. Next, Archaon set his sights on the steed of the apocalypse, more commonly known as Dorghar, Gurshi Ishfak, and Yonterli. This was the demonic mount of Agramon. Archaon battled his way to Agramon's palace and sneaked inside. There he hid beneath a beast that was part man, part mammoth, and part insect. Archaon was able to track the demonic horse by its sulphurous stench. There Archaon vaulted into its back. The steed, obviously frightened, changed shape and burst into flames. However, Archaon was able to break the will of the demonic stallion and force it to serve him instead. He was then able to ride the steed of the apocalypse out of the realm of chaos. Next, he set his sights on the legendary blade known as the Slayer of Kings. This was the trusted blade of Vangel, the second Everchosen, to which Vangel had actually bound a greater demon into the blade, with the rage-imprisoned demon empowering the blade like no other. The blade was located atop a chimera-infested plateau, where he slew many chimera, and the local hordes and warbands saw these feats and decided to join him and aid him in dispatching the chimera hordes. Archaon and a number of companions then traveled to the top of the plateau, but the blade was nowhere to be found. Yet he looked down from the top of the plateau and swore that one day he would rule the whole of the Warhammer world. Suddenly, the mountain behind him shook, and what he mistook for a mountain was actually the father of the dragon ogre race, Krakenrock the Black, who had been in a deep slumber for many, many years. Such a movement caused earthquakes in the lands below him, and even Archaon, powerful as he was, knew that he could not defeat such a mighty foe. Archaon and his companions sought to sneak past the dragon ogre in order to find the Slayer of Kings, only to find that the sword he sought was buried in the dragon ogre's chest. A plan was made in order to retrieve the sword without waking the sleeping dragon ogre. One of Archaon's strongest companions was able to lift up one of the dragon ogre's talons high enough for Archaon to retrieve the demon sword. However, the demon sword did not wish to serve another master and began to shriek and screech, so loudly in fact that the dragon ogre almost awoke. But Archaon, being the quick thinker that he is, plunged the Slayer of Kings into his companion's chest, which was able to silence the blade long enough for him to sheath it and make his way back to his hordes before the dragon ogre awoke. Archaon now had retrieved 5 of the 6 treasures of chaos, and now finally set his sights on the final one, the Crown of Domination. It is said that the crown strikes terror into the bearer's foes and gives strength to his very allies. However, the crown was lost to history, and only Be'lakor knew of its location, and after many years decided to reveal the location to Archaon in hopes of stealing it after he had located it. The crown lay at the first shrine of chaos, high on an icy peak in the World's Edge Mountains. There Archaon was tested by each of the chaos gods to see if he was truly worthy to become the Everchosen. Nurgle sent deadly diseases, which Archaon fought back with willpower alone. Tzeentch created a labyrinth of crystal, but Archaon blindfolded himself and used instinct alone to navigate it. Slaanesh sent temptation after temptation, but Archaon resisted and never diverted from his path to the inner gates of the shrine. 3 gods had tested him, but there was a 4th. After passing through the inner gates, Archaon found himself on a narrow causeway surrounded with hellfire that scorched his skin and burnt away his hair. There his final test lay waiting. A mighty bloodthirster erupted from the flames and attacked the potential Everchosen. The greater demon was strong, but Archaon drew strength from the Slayer of Kings and wrestled the bloodthirster's weapons away and proceeded to strangle it with its own whip. The hellfire dispersed, and Archaon could see a simple shrine with a throne on top, with a withered corpse sitting upon it, and upon the corpse's head lay the crown of domination. Archaon took the crown, and his hools magically healed, and his frame swelled with power. After a century of beginning his quest, he proclaimed himself to be Everchosen. All that lay wait now was to be coronated. The demon prince Be'lakor was the one to do this. However, as we know, Be'lakor wished to take the crown for himself, and he gathered enough power to gain physical form and descended on Archaon to feast on his soul. But the dark gods had chosen Archaon to be the Everchosen, and Be'lakor was forced to kneel before Archaon and coronate him as the Everchosen. Archaon's quest was now complete, and it was from that day forward that the last spark of Archaon's humanity was extinguished. From now until the end of days, the once just knight was now the Everchosen of the Chaos Gods. Now, I would like to digress for a moment and mention that since then there have been 2 Chaos campaigns. One known as the Storm of Chaos, which has then since been written out and retconned, and the second being the End Times, which was the end of the world. Firstly, we will look at the Storm of Chaos campaign, as even though it is not relevant anymore, it will prove relevant in future videos. Trust me on this, I have a few theories. Now, the foundation of the Storm of Chaos was set when Archaon managed to obtain the 6 treasures of Chaos and become the Everchosen of Chaos. He then gathered a mighty host of Chaos worshippers and united many tribes of marauders and begun to sweep south from the Chaos Wastes. And the Everchosen's ultimate goal was to rule the world, as stated before. Kislev naturally was the first nation to fall. Being so close to the Chaos Wastes, they were obviously a prime target. And an Imperial army, knowing full well how much of a threat Archaon and his army was, marched to meet them as they marched through Kislev. This army was led by the Grand Theogenist himself, Volkmar the Grim. But Volkmar did not realize the true extent of Archaon's power, and he and his army were swiftly defeated, with Volkmar being killed. In the meantime, Emperor Karl Franz was gathering men and allies together to counter the Storm of Chaos. An alliance of men, high elves and dwarves banded together in hopes to defeating this army. And the prophet of Sigmar, Luthor Huss, discovered a man by the name of Valten, who bore the same physical characteristics and will of Sigmar himself. So much so that Valten was pronounced to be Sigmar reincarnated, to which Karl Franz proclaimed him to be the spiritual heir of Sigmar, and even gifted him Gal Maraz as a symbol of his authority. Now, while this was happening, the armies of Chaos were making their way to the city of the White Wolf, Middenheim, where the Everchosen planned to enter the Temple of Ulrich and corrupt the eternal flame from within, by using his essence to corrupt the flame and usher in the end times. The armies of Chaos laid siege to Middenheim. However, they were soon forced to lift the siege because of the arrival of the armies of Bretonnia, the remnants of Kislev, Karl Franz, and also, interestingly enough, the Greenskins. The armies met each other in battle, with the 2 great armies ravaging each other. And soon, Valten and Archaon found themselves face to face, with Valten killing the steed of the Apocalypse as retribution for the Chaos Hordes slaying his own steed with a blast from a cannon. Archaon was now dismounted, and the duel began. Both champions fought long and hard, but eventually Archaon gained the upper hand, striking at Valten and tearing his armor. However, upon doing so, he revealed Valten's birthmark, which looked like the twin-tailed comet. This naturally shook the Lord of the End Times, as he had thought that Sigmar had been reborn in order to defeat him, much like Sigmar had done to the very first Everchosen. Luthor Huss saw the opportunity here and assaulted the Everchosen, dealing several blows towards him. However, Archaon was able to regain his composure and strike Huss with his right hand, sending him flying over the battlefield. It looked like victory had been assured by the Everchosen, were it not for the Orc war boss, Grimgor Ironhide, who saw this as an opportunity to prove his supremacy and assaulted Archaon, who essentially sucker punched the Everchosen, knocking him to the floor. The Orc, instead of finishing the Everchosen, just declared, "Grimgor is the best," and left the field. Archaon was defeated, and apparently retreated back to the Chaos Wastes, whilst leaving the Empire as a mess. Now, I know there's a lot more detail towards the Storm of Chaos campaign. However, I want to make that a separate video, which will then have some theories regarding it. And I wanted to leave this out mainly because it's not considered canon anymore. So without further ado, let's get back now to the canon part of the story, the end times. Now, the end times lore begins back at the moment where Archaon is crowned Everchosen by Be'lakor. Now, immediately after this, Archaon sets off to fulfill his plans, uniting the northern tribes, calling about all enemies of the Empire and other forces of the Warp. Mighty champions of chaos were then sent to attack various places across the world, with Kislev, naturally, being the first nation to fall. Archaon's forces fell upon Kislev like water on a rock, burning down whole cities and villages and leaving none alive. Even the mighty city of Kislev fell within a single night. The few remaining Kislevites rallied behind the Tsarina Katerin in an effort to hold back the hordes of chaos. But they were few, and the warriors of chaos seemed unending. Without any trouble, the hordes of chaos rampaged through what remained of Kislev, killing all that they saw. And Kislev was now no more. With this, the hordes of chaos had felt that they had been tested enough, and set their sights for their true enemy, the Empire. But the Supreme Patriarch Balthazar Gelt realized that they could not withstand the hordes of chaos, and thus raised a magical wall many miles that stood like a floodgate that held the hordes of chaos at bay. This magical wall could not fully stop the hordes of chaos though, as warbands led by particularly bloodthirsty or foolhardy chieftains scaled the towering walls and managed to raid some villages and besiege scattered fortresses. Other hordes of Norskans would evade the wall by traveling to the Empire by ship, and in seemingly seconds, Nordland was overrun by Northlanders. Interestingly enough, the Skaven and the Council of 13 had joined up with the Everchosen, as they felt that the Everchosen himself would bring their time of ascension. Archaon, obviously being a man of somewhat intelligence, knew that the Skaven would be a valuable ally more than they would be an enemy, as after all, the Skaven are true children of chaos, just as the Beastmen are. While this was happening, the great bastion that was created by Balthazar Gelt began to wane, as it required a constant stream of magic to maintain it. And with the revelation of Balthazar Gelt's supposed betrayal, the cult of Sigmar, which was by far the most powerful faction in the Empire, refused to continue participating in the rituals required to strengthen the wall. This led to a huge increase in the number of breaches, until eventually, within a few weeks, the bastion was finally torn down in multiple sections, and the hordes of chaos poured through, with Archaon and his forces now making their way to Middenheim. Just as Archaon's hordes marched, the defenders of Middenheim readied themselves for the horde's onslaught. Valten, herald of Sigmar and the champion of the Empire, had ridden hard for Middenheim, seeking to bolster the city's defenses with his own mighty force. But the unexpected happened, where the Elector Count Boris Todbringer, consumed with his vendetta against his longtime rival Khazrak the One-Eye, against the better judgment of his nobles and the Knights of the White Wolf, decided to sally forth into the Drakwold to slay the beast once and for all. In his stead, he decided to make Valten the acting lord of all of Middenheim. But the loss of Boris Todbringer proved to be a great one, as the morale of the defenders of Middenheim weakened greatly without their Elector Count to inspire them. But Valten was determined, and felt that with the aid of Sigmar and Ulrich, the two greatest of the gods of the Empire, that he would be able to bring Archaon himself to battle and slay him. But Archaon knew of Valten well, and was equally determined to meet him in battle, so he could further prove the lie of the false idols he called gods. The battle was joined at the very walls of Middenheim itself, with both Northlanders and Southlanders dying in mass, and the Midlanders were able to hold back the hordes of chaos, for there was an ancient legend of their forefathers that told that the city of Ulrich would remain unconquered so long as the flame of the god burned. Yet, the flame would not be extinguished by the hands of chaos, but more by Teclis, the loremaster of Ulfwan, who sought to steal the flame of Ulrich in order to revive his brother. However, this ended the god Ulrich, and thus assured Chaos's victory in Middenheim. The Midlanders let out screams of horror and sorrow as they saw their flame extinguished, but Vultan was still determined, and reaped a terrible toil from amongst the legends of the North, so much so that Archaon himself had taken the field, and sought Vultan directly. The Everchosen would taunt Vultan enough that they would finally meet in battle, and thus the Slayer of Kings and Galmaraz clashed again and again. The two would trade blows endlessly, until Gregor Martok, who had been filled with the last withered godspark of Ulrich, attempted to intervene, in an effort to curve the battle to Vultan's favour. However, Vultan did fall, not by the hands of Archaon, but by the hands of Vermin Lord Screech Verminking, who decapitated the Herald of Sigmar. The Eye of Shirian then flared like a dying star, and all who gathered around felt Archaon's godlike rage, a force unto itself that washed over all present as a wave of agonizing, incandescent heat that burnt away the smoke and drove back the shadow. The skies buckled with the three-eyed king's fury as a bolt of sorcerous lightning sundered the skies and smote the temple of Ulrich. Though the battle was won, Archaon was enraged, his anger being denied this prophesied battle between the Everchosen and the Avatar of Sigmar, but quickly turned his rage towards Gregor Martok, as he raised the Supreme Patriarch by the throat and slew him with his blade. Middenheim had fallen, and the remaining defenders tried to escape. However, the Norskens made pursuit, slaying all of them as they ran. Archaon's allies had laid waste to the rest of the Empire, the same as he had laid waste to Middenheim. All that was left was Averheim, the provincial capital of Averland. But that was also soon to fall, as the Chaos Horde set their sights towards it. Archaon, on the other hand, had a moment's rest, and he claimed the Temple of Ulrich as his hall, his throne being forged from the bones of Ulrich's priests, and the hammer of Galmaraz set upon it as its trophy, a testament to the supremacy of the dark gods of the north over the deities of the south. There he received the supplications of warriors and demons who were oath-pledged before the gods to his service, and with the Temple of Ulrich he had proven that Ulrich was a lie, and Sigmar will be proven a lie with the skull of Karl Franz. However, as Karl Franz lay mortally wounded, Sigmar Heldenhammer decided to intervene, and thus took over the dying emperor's body. Averheim found salvation in Sigmar Heldenhammer and the dwarves of Karak-Kadrin, but this only fueled Archaon's rage more, as he realized that the time for deception and feint had long passed, and now dawned the hour of murder and slaughter. He unsheathed his weapon and slew a greater demon of Tzeentch in order to use his blood as a sacrificial offering to the most powerful of the Chaos Gods, Khorne. Khorne in turn replied in kind, and summoned forth one of the most strongest bloodthirsters in his army, which had pledged its allegiance to Archaon, as such was the will of the Bloodfather. He then gathered his most brutal of warriors and set off, intent on destroying the last vestige of imperial resistance. Archaon's brutal host fell upon Averheim, and few could hold against them. Not even the combined might of the Imperials, Bretonnia, and the dwarves could hold back the fury of the North, as they cut their way through the now dwindling numbers. As the battle raged on and on, Archaon set his sights towards the Emperor, leading a charge of bloodthirsty Norskens towards him. And with the Emperor in his sights, he raised his mighty blade, rode towards his enemy, but then stopped. In truth, he raised his sword as a signal for his swords of chaos to charge ahead and engage the foe, whilst he waited and watched as the Emperor tore aside his most strongest of champions. He simply nodded to the Emperor. Some would think of this as a salute, or the satisfied foresight of the contest to come. Still the Norsemen raged on, cutting down any that they could, and in turn being cut down themselves. But many more Norskens would join the fray. Their numbers were endless, and the Imperials knew this. Yet as the battles raged, one stood above them all. Archaon the Everchosen, and Sigmar Heldenhammer, in the body of Karl Franz, were locked in a duel. They were almost physically equal to one another, with even their own mounts, Droghar for the Everchosen and Deathclaw for Sigmar, fighting with the same ferocity as their masters. Weapon would counter weapon, and spell would counter spell, until the hammer of Sigmar battered away Archaon's rune shield and thundered into the plate armor of the Everchosen. This made Archaon cry out in pain, a small victory for the god of the Empire. But this was to prove short-lived, as the Emperor's defenses were weakened, and the Slayer of Kings lashed out to take advantage. The Emperor's loyal steed, Deathclaw, saw the impending blow before the Emperor did, and threw himself in front of the Slayer of Kings, which killed the mighty griffin and sent the Emperor flying from its saddle. Archaon took advantage of this, and was on his foe the minute that he had fallen on the earth. The Emperor was mortally wounded, and Archaon slowly approached his beaten foe. He raised the Slayer of Kings and brought it down in a murderous arc, but the Emperor was quick and raised his hammer in a desperate attempt to guard against it. The two weapons met, and the Emperor was able to protect himself. So the Everchosen swung again. Once again, the Emperor lifted up his hammer in an effort to protect himself, but this time, Galmaraz exploded into 1,000 shards of light. The Emperor had been bested. Archaon, seeing the Emperor as wretched and unworthy of even the effort of killing, elected to deny him the honor of a warrior's death, declaring that no god favored him nor cared if he lived or died. The remaining forces of the Empire were transported to Athaloran by Balthasar Gelt, leaving Ungrim Ironfist and his dwarves to cover their retreat, though they did not last long after. Archaon was content to stay in Middenheim for a while, yet still sent out armies to go and extinguish the last resistance to chaos. Perhaps Archaon knew that the now dubbed Incarnates were making their way to Middenheim, and thus he lay in wait for them. With the Incarnates was Sigmar once again, who had now fully manifested into the mortal plane. The Incarnates began battle against the Everchosen. First to fall was the Incarnate of Beasts, and then the Everchosen moved to engage Sigmar in single combat. Both were proved to be equal, yet Archaon fought on. Sigmar even tried to distract the Everchosen, lamenting that he, a son of a daughter of the Empire, may have been the sword that would have wiped the Empire clean of taint and led humanity into a bright new age. But this only infuriated Archaon more, and in his hatred he decreed the God King as a liar and a coward. In his frenzy he managed to disarm the God King. Archaon readied his demon blade for the blow that would kill a god. Yet Ulrich intervened, as he sought to repay the Everchosen for the despoiling of Middenheim and the slaughter of his worshippers. This had bought Sigmar enough time to regain his composure, but whilst this happened, Ulrich fell once again, as the last sparks of his being were snuffed out forever. Sigmar was enraged that Ulrich had been defeated and destroyed. He gathered what strength he could and destroyed the legendary demon blade. He then hammered upon the Everchosen with blow after blow until he finally cast him into the new Chaos Gate that had recently opened to end the world. It had looked as the Lord of the End Times had been defeated, but the Incarnates failed to close the Chaos Gate, and Archaon climbed his way back not long after. Archaon was driven completely mad for the revelations that he had borne witness to, and fell upon Sigmar with rage so unholy that it blackened the soul. The newborn Chaos Gate fed its dark hunger upon the world, while Sigmar and the Lord of the End Times fought until the very end. Darkness took over the land, and the two figures eventually disappeared from sight. The world had fallen to chaos, and had been destroyed. And with that, we've reached the end of our lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed extra long lore video than usual. If you did enjoy, may I suggest liking the video and perhaps subscribing to the channel, because it really does help us out. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Adios. Child was to be known as Diedrich. Diedrich was a devout child, and due to his northern heritage, grew tall and strong. When he was of age, Diedrich became a squire to Sir Castor, who was a Templar of Sigmar. However, his tutelage under the Templar was not to last long, as Castor died after falling into a pit trap in the Drakewald forest, then being devoured by the local night goblins, who had also killed Diedrich's fellow squire, Niels. Diedrich barely survived. However, as fate would have it, he had retrieved Castor's sword, Terminus, and his warhorse, Oberon, and was able to escape. He then took it upon himself to return Castor's belongings to his now widow. However, she did not have any interest on keeping her former husband's belongings, and allowed Diedrich to keep them. She also bequeathed to him the surname town where his mother was repeatedly raped. The village was sacked, and Archaon's mother was left for dead. However, she was found by her husband and her children while she was still clinging to life, and later gave birth to the raider's bastard son. Birthing such a child proved to be too much for this woman, and she died shortly after childbirth. The woman's husband could not bear the sight of the child, as the child was not his, and the child took his wife away. Because of this, the child was abandoned and almost savaged by the wolves of Lorelon. However, it seemed like fate was not to allow the child to die, as a local priest called Hieronymus Dagobert appeared and drove off the wolves. Hieronymus took pity on the small child, taking the small baby under his wing and raising him, even giving him a name. From then on, the small child, as Norscan blood flowed through his veins, and thus the essence of chaos was already inside of him. Shortly after recovering from this ordeal, he had learnt of his true heritage, that his mother was a woman of Nordland, and his father was actually a man of the North. This news horrified Diedrich beyond belief, but it wasn't until Diedrich had come across a specific set of writings that his road of damnation would not begin. Diedrich had stumbled across a number of books penned by the heretic Necrodomo the Insane. The writing spoke of a prophecy of a man who would become the Everchosen, one favored by all the Chaos gods, and empowered to see the world remade in their image. And much to Diedrich's horror, it looks like he was to become the Everchosen himself. Diedrich travelled far and wide in hopes of finding salvation. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan, and we're back with another lore video. Today's topic will be the Everchosen himself, Archaon. So without further ado, let's begin. Archaon, the Everchosen, the Three-Eyed King, and the Lord of the End Times, is the self-proclaimed supreme champion of the four Chaos gods. And that title is rightfully his, for he is the one who ushered in the End Times, and ended the Warhammer world as we know it. But before this man became the chosen son of Chaos and ushered in the End Times, he had another name, and lived another life. You see, the man who would later become known as Archaon the Everchosen was born inside the confines of the Empire. Archaon was born in a small village called Hagendorf on the coast of Nordland, and was the result of a Nordic raiding party towards the Castor, and with her sponsorship, he was able to join the prestigious Order of the Twin-Tailed Orb. Interestingly enough, the man who would later become the Everchosen was quite the fanatical follower of Sigmar, and had no problem cutting down the agents of chaos and the presumed agents of chaos, even if they were small children. Diedrich followed his knightly duties without question, until several years later, where his life would change forever. Diedrich had found himself fighting a war band of beastmen, which, for the powerful knight with Norscan blood flowing through his veins, had no issue dispatching. However, he was wounded when his weapon clashed against that of a beastman, and a shard of warpstone pierced his eye. Now normally, even a small shard of warpstone would be damning to any mere mortal. However, Diedrich was no mere mortal.